there is a subtle difference between the two terms, religion and spirituality. Spirituality deals with principles and religion deals with formal expression of those principles. But in this talk, I will not make any distinction between religion and spirituality. A common perception of religion or spirituality is that it is very dogmatic, and a common view of science is that it is very pragmatic. Now, I want to argue that science is at least as dogmatic as so-called spirituality, and spirituality is no less pragmatic than science. The features based on which religion or spirituality is termed to be dogmatic can be classified mainly into three categories. Number one, unquestionable faith on the scriptures. Okay? You are not allowed to question, you have to accept them as they are. Second, strict adherence to the rituals prescribed by any particular religion. And third, unflinching faith in the preachers and the saints of any particular religion. Now, let us look at science. Is science free from all these things? I say no. The textbooks and the journals and the conference papers, those are like the scriptures of science. Often people say that because this article has been published in so-and-so journal, therefore it must be correct. Similarly, every university, every college has its own rituals. Rituals in the form of mode of teaching, mode of interaction between students and teachers, the format in which you do experiments, you present results, you create your dissertation. Everywhere there is ritual. And third, we have faith in our teachers, faith in the scientists whose work we study, without which we cannot progress. Okay? Now, let us look at science, how it is pragmatic. The pragmatism of science mainly can be classified into three categories again. First, science tries to solve practical problems. It tries to make our life more comfortable. Number two, science is based on logic and reasoning, cause and effect. And number three, science is verifiable. Whatever claim you make, either that can be proved or that can be experimentally verified. Now, I would like to argue that religion or spirituality also has the same features. How? Science tries to solve problems of the outside world. Let's say you are in an air-conditioned room and you hear the news of someone beloved just passed away. So can you enjoy the soothing breeze of the air conditioner at that moment? I bet not. If the outside world is in perfect shape, but your inside is in mess, then that perfection of the outside world has no meaning. On the other hand, even if the outside world is in perfect mess, but your inside world is calm and composed, there is hope for survival. So science and spirituality work at different level. Our well-being, our happiness ultimately depends on a perfect balance between the inside world and the outside world. Science addresses how to solve the problems in the outside world, and spirituality addresses how to solve problems in the inside world. Next, like science, all the spiritual texts of all religion, if you deeply study, you can find that they are based on absolute logic. Every verse followed from the previous verse logically, though often in public those things are not discussed for other reasons. For example, if you look at Bhagavad Gita, the entire philosophy is developed based on questions and answers, arguments and counter-arguments. Okay? In science, we have good teachers and bad teachers. In spirituality also, we have good teachers and bad teachers. So, a good teacher in science can explain you things, can entertain questions. Similarly, in spirituality also, a good spiritual master will encourage questions and arguments from you. The third category, that verifiability, spirituality also has verifiability. If you follow a particular spiritual practice as per the specification under the guidance of a proper teacher, then you can feel whatever theory is proposed, whether that is true or not. So, in science, we do experiments, and after the experimental results, we claim, yes, my original hypothesis was correct or wrong. Similarly, in spirituality, after we do the experiment, we have the right to say, yes, it is acceptable or it is not. Okay. Now, let us turn into two broad approaches that is followed in science. The first one is deductive approach. The second one is inductive approach. The deductive approach consists of axioms, rules of inference, theorems, and proofs. Axioms are like statements, assumptions, which you cannot prove. For example, you have Euclid's axiom for the subject of geometry, you have postulates for the subject of quantum mechanics, etc. Rules of inference tell you how to derive one step from the previous step in a mathematical argument. Theorems are statements which are either true or false, and a proof is a sequence of steps starting from some axioms and ending in the theorem statement following the rules of inference. Most of the disciplines under the broad category of mathematics try to follow this approach, the deductive approach. But there are other sciences as well, like biology, chemistry, psychology, sociology, that take another approach, which is called the inductive approach, where we have axioms, we have hypotheses, that means some statements which can be either true or false, but then instead of proof, we have experiments and observation. And based on the observation, we conclude whether the hypothesis was correct or wrong. Now, there are many people who believe that eventually all the inductive sciences can be converted to deductive science, and ultimately we can explain everything in the form of mathematical equations. But actually that is wrong, because the deductive system itself has its inherent limitations. To summarize, there are two famous results by mathematician Kurt Gödel. The first one says that in any deductive system, there will always be some statements which are true, but which cannot be proved within the system. You can prove those statements provided you add more axioms, you add more rules to the system to create a larger system, but in that larger system itself, you will have new statements which are true and not provable in the larger system. So you can build on and on and on and go ad infinitum. At each stage, you can prove lower system, but you cannot prove the system that you build in. So there will always remain some truths out there in the universe which will not be covered by any mathematical theory. The second result says that no axiomatic system or deductive system can verify its own consistency. Now, consistency is a very simple thing. It means that you cannot say a statement is both true and false at the same time. For example, I cannot claim that right now, right here, it is raining as well as not raining, right? Now, what this result says is that no axiom system can prove or verify its own consistency. But we have an inherent assumption that an axiom system is consistent. Otherwise, the whole paradigm, the whole science will collapse. But the problem is we cannot prove it. We have to assume. So that is a strong faith. Of course, we can add more axioms. We can extend the system in order to prove consistency of the lower system. But again, the larger system becomes devoid of any proof of consistency. So there lies a big question of faith and assumption in the correctness of any theory that we can make. I claim that spirituality is an inductive science, like the other inductive sciences whose example I have given. So, an example of axiom could be existence of soul or existence of God. An example of hypothesis could be for example, if you connect soul to God, then the soul becomes happy. Example of experiments and observation could be prayers, meditation, chanting, etc. And after you perform the experiment, you see the effect, you have the right to deny the hypothesis or accept the hypothesis in the form of conclusion. Now, I would talk about 5 major blames that science puts on spirituality. And I would like to show that science itself is not free from those blames. Number 1, religions are the root of all riots and fights that is happening in the world. So should not all religions be banned? My argument would be, physics and chemistry are the source of all bombs and all nuclear weapons and all the disaster, all guns that is happening in the world. So should not physics and chemistry be banned altogether? Should not Einstein be blamed for his E equal to mc square because that was responsible for the atomic explosion in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? So our mode of thinking is of course wrong. The same knife in the hand of a surgeon can save a life, and the same knife in the hand of a murderer can take a life. So it is not the problem of religion or science per se. It is how we use them. It is our intention. Second point, this is a picture of a child born after nuclear disaster. So you can see how much role a science can play. The second point is, why follow a particular path? Cannot everyone invent one's own spiritual path? Or you don't have to call it a spiritual path. You say the path of your own life, from your own experience, and then live your life according to it? Well, in science, does everyone reinvent the wheel? When you go to a new apartment, before taking your electricity connection, do you decide to do research on your own to find out the best mode of power generation and then subscribe to Electric Supply Corporation or whatsoever? No. Both in science and in spirituality, anyone is welcome to try invent new path, to create new ideas. However, one cannot do everything in one lifetime. So you have to begin somewhere. You have to take some things which others have done research on in both the disciplines. Next, science says that why you should follow a particular guru or a spiritual master. One can read and understand and practice on one's own if at all one wishes to follow a spiritual path. In science, don't we have PhD supervisors? Don't we have lab instructors? Of course, few geniuses are out there who may not need any guidance. So in spirituality also, we might have some geniuses who may not need any guru. But for the common mass, we need a guide, we need a supervisor in both the disciplines. Is not spirituality and religion the source of all superstition? For example, the untouchability that has been talked about, other vulnerabilities? Well, the answer to that is not, say, mobile phone the source of all MMS scandals? So should we all throw away our mobiles? Is not credit card the source of all the fraud that is happening in the digital banking industry? So should we go back to our cash-based banking system? Of course not. So in science, what we try to do? We try to build protection mechanism. We try to educate people about the potential vulnerabilities. So similarly, if you go deep into any religion or any spirituality, you will find that those blames are actually baseless. Okay? Just like people misuse these technologies for their own benefit, similarly, there are people who misuse spirituality and religion for their own benefit just to make money or to make votes. No spiritual principle talks about these things. So, we have to educate people, we have to spread the awareness, and then there will be the same protection mechanism just like in the mobile phone or in the credit card. The last one, is not spirituality intangible? Is not the result produced by spirituality intangible? Well, yes, science do produce tangible result. For example, AC in the summer. But spirituality, as I have already described, is an AC for the summer of the mind. We see that in schools and colleges and universities, we have formal education of the so-called science. However, proper formal teaching and formal education on the logical reasoning about spirituality and religion is missing. As we have seen that spirituality is no less science than science itself. So either we accept both or reject both. Thank you very much.